In this episode, we'll begin to drill the shelf pin holes with LR32 system. One thing I always like to do before I get to assembly and layout is double check all my measurements. I look at the set of plans, make sure everything's what it should be. One thing that has changed is I just received my casters and they're slightly taller than what I drew my plans up for. What that's going to do is make my rolling MFT cart taller than my MFT. I don't want that. I want them the same height. So what I need to do is cut down all my center panels about 10 millimeters. Luckily with the Festool system, that's going to be a quick and easy process. So I've gone ahead and I've labeled each and every one of my pieces for the cabinet itself. And I've also started to actually mark and lay out each and every piece where it goes. That way again, so when I start putting the domino connectors in, I can see where my domino has to go, where my base plate has to go. Just makes it a lot easier for assembly. You can do it however you want, but I've found the more I mark, the less I mess up. This is also a great time to test fit your pieces, to see if they fit inside the drawings that you've done on top of your project. Sometimes the drawing you do on your 3D software does not line up with what you actually cut. And that could be just a variance in thickness of the piece of plywood. So this is a great time to make any changes that you might need to. As I'm laying stuff out, another thing I like to do is measure as little as possible. Once I have some of my marks on here, the main reference marks, then I'll just take my material, line it up where it goes, and transfer the marks that way. There's a lot less chance for error by doing that than when I measure. So the main reason I've laid everything out up to this point is for the dominoes, obviously, but also for the LR32 system. I need to know where to reference my guide rail and my router so I get my holes in the right position. Another thing you need to take into account is the thickness of that face frame material we're going to be using. Because each time I do the first set of holes for those drawers, I'm referencing off the face of the cabinet, which is going to be the face of my edge banding or my face frame material. I always want to make sure that I account for that so that when I'm done, the drawers themselves are going to be perfectly flush with the front of my face frame. So because I'm using both the SYS AZ drawers and the Systainer³ Rails for the Systainers, I like to lay out exactly where my holes are going to go for the LR32 system. That way, I don't get confused when I'm switching back and forth between panels. So I've gone ahead and I've already attached the stops to the bottom of my guide rail. And what those stops do is they align these holes on the panel so each one, the holes are exactly the same. So when I put my drawer in, I'm not getting a drawer that's tipped up and down. In my case, I went ahead and I designed this panel and this whole cart so that this panel is divisible by 32 millimeters. What that does is that when I flip this over, those stops fit snugly right on that panel. So whether I'm coming from this direction drilling my holes or if I'm coming from this direction drilling my holes, all the holes are going to be aligned perfectly. Now, if your panel isn't divisible by 32, that's where marking your top and the bottom of the panel comes into play. What I've done in the past, if I have a panel that's not divisible by 32, I'll just mark one side of my rail as the bottom. And I know each time I drill my holes, I always want that bottom mark on my rail to line up with the bottom mark on my panel. So the next thing I need to do is get my edge guides put on here to line up the holes front to back. And that's just a matter of snapping them on the rail. And then the two pins on the front will drop down. And then I'm set and I know that I'll be exactly the dimension I need off the front of my cabinet. Once my guide rail is positioned correctly, I want to make sure that I secure the guide rail to the material, but also secure the material to your workstation. Once the guide rail and the material is secure, I can remove the edge guides and we're ready to punch some holes. So the bit that I have in here is the flat bottom bit. There's two bits that come with the system. The through bit, which will plunge the hole all the way through, or this flat bottom bit. I've gone ahead and set my depth. With everything lined up and clamped, this pin will now line up with these holes in the guide rail, making everything exactly the same distance apart. With those holes done, I can move on to the rest of my panels. Because I've already got my stops set to this dimension for the SYS AZ drawers, I'll go ahead and go through all the panels, get those done first. And then I can come back, readjust it to do these, so on and so forth. Just a process that I like to do. If you have questions about the LR32 system, check out the link in the description. So now I've got the holes closest to the edge of the panel done. I need to do the holes in the middle of the panel. Issue is that doesn't reach to reference off the edge of my panel. So what I've done is lined up my guide rail and my router so that the bit on my router is directly over my line. And I can take one of my edge guides, loosen it up, reference off the back lip, tighten that down, do the same thing with the other one, and then I can run through the rest of my panels. So for these holes, they're going to be 17 millimeters off the face of the plywood, not the edge banding, the plywood. So we have these last two sets of holes, and then we can move on to the next steps. So that may have seemed like a lot of work, but drilling all those holes ahead of time gives me the versatility so that down the road, if I change my workflow, I can adjust those SYS AZ drawers or the SYS Gen 3 rails to fit my current workflow. So the next step in the process is to use the Domino 500 to make mortises for the knockdown connectors as well as our solid wood tenons. Then we can really see the progress as we start to assemble the work center. If you want to continue with the build, click here or check this out. Don't forget to subscribe. If you want to be notified when we upload new content, click that notification bell.